Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into a stack of sources you shared with us. Video commentary, news clips, notes are giving us a really specific, sharply satirical look at some recent events happening in Brazil.
Yeah, it's quite a collection.
Our mission in this deep dive is to walk through your material, pull out the core ideas, and really get a handle on the particular viewpoint the speaker in these sources is putting forward. It's a fascinating, sometimes jarring look at power, justice, and, well, the quirks of everyday life, all filtered through a very critical and humorous lens.
What's truly interesting about this specific material you've provided is how the source speaker connects seemingly unrelated incidents, from policies affecting prisoners to the actions of high-profile judges, and even a viral video to build a pretty cohesive critique.
Right.
We're here to explore those connections and the perspective they represent, strictly based on what's in the stack you sent over.
Absolutely. So let's jump straight into the first major point that stands out in your sources, and honestly, it's quite something. It's about a government program offering some, well, let's just say unexpected benefits inside prison.
Unexpected is one word for it, yeah.
According to the news reports and commentary in your material, there's this program called Pena Justa, which means just penalty. The source has mentioned it's a pilot project in Espírito Santo with talk of rolling it out nationally.
Okay.
And the details from the sources are pretty striking. Free beauty salons, free martial arts classes, specifically jiu-jitsu is highlighted, and in-cell TVs for up to 30 hours of movies a week on what are described as armored TVs.
Armored TVs, right. The official objective cited by authorities in your source material for this program is focused on rehabilitation, to guarantee dignity, education, and work for criminals.
Which sounds reasonable on the surface.
It aligns with broader penological goals aimed at reducing recidivism, the standard arguments.
Right, that's the official stated goal. But the source speaker in your material has a fiercely sarcastic take on this. Their critique, as presented here, is essentially asking you, the listener, to compare your life to the benefits offered.
Mm-hmm.
They practically suggest committing a crime to get access to these things. The commentary explicitly contrasts these amenities with what an ordinary taxpayer has access to.
They really hammer that point home.
Yeah, it directly poses questions like, do you have a free beauty salon whenever you want? Free jiu-jitsu classes?
Yeah.
A fancy, super durable TV with 30 hours of free movies at home?
It's a deliberately provocative comparison.
The clear implication drawn by the source speaker is that inmates are deemed deserving of these perks, while the taxpayers who fund them, or their kids who might want those same things, apparently aren't. It's framed in your source material as a stark example of the government favoring criminals over its law-abiding citizens.
And what's highlighted by this specific commentary is that tension, isn't it? The tension between the stated aims of rehabilitation programs and the public perception of fairness, especially concerning the allocation of public funds.
Exactly.
The source speaker uses these specific examples, the salon, the jiu-jitsu, to underscore a perceived inequality, providing amenities inside prison that are frankly luxuries for many people outside.
Yeah.
It prompts you, the listener, to consider how public money is prioritized, viewed through this particular critical lens presented in your material.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit, based on your sources, and look at something involving a high-profile judicial figure and some media attention. This centers around Supreme Court Justice Luís Roberto Barroso.
Right, the dinner incident.
Your material describes an incident where Justice Barroso was filmed singing apparently the popular Brazilian song Evidências at a private fundraising dinner in São Paulo.
Which is quite a visual.
Definitely. The sources specifically mentioned the guest list included business leaders, pointing out the CEO of iFood was there, and, crucially, noting that iFood has cases pending before the STF. A Globo TV presenter was also mentioned as attending.
And that's key context from the source. According to Barroso's account within the source material, the dinner's stated purpose was a fundraiser for an STF scholarship program.
Right.
The specific goal mentioned was providing 100 scholarships of $3,000 for 2 years to the top 100 Black candidates in the National Magistracy exam, funded privately and administered by the Fundación Getulio Vargas.
So, that's the background, the official reason for the gathering. But your sources really focus on Barroso's reaction to the media coverage of this event.
Yes, his response drew a lot of commentary in the material.
He publicly complained about it, calling the coverage nonsense from people who need to sell newspapers talking bobajum, basically pure drivel. He even referred to it as unculturedness.
Strong words.
He was particularly upset by suggestions in the media that he met businessmen under the pretext of fundraising, feeling they misrepresented the event's true purpose. And this is where the source speaker in your material jumps in with their satirical take. They really mock Barroso's indignation and what they perceive as intellectual arrogance.
Yeah, the commentary gets quite pointed there.
The commentary adds specific, almost comical details, like picturing him wanting to grab the microphone from the singer or wearing a full suit to what sounds like a casual performance exaggerations, clearly designed to paint a picture of someone perhaps overreacting to being scrutinized.
Well, what this segment from your sources brings into focus is that inherent complexity when powerful public figures, especially judges, engage in private interactions with individuals or entities who have matters before their court.
Sure.
Your source material highlights the contrast between the official explanation, a philanthropic event, and the public perception when stakeholders with pending cases are present.
Right. Optics matter.
Exactly. The source speaker's commentary then focuses on Barroso's reaction, framing it as a response that perhaps reveals more than he intended about his view of public scrutiny.
Interesting.
For you, the listener, understanding this dynamic matters because the behavior and public image of judicial figures directly influence trust in the justice system itself, and this source is offering a specific critique of that dynamic.
Moving on then, let's look at another point from your sources that involves the judiciary and the media, but in a different context. A lawsuit brought against a journalist.
Ah, yes, the Zero Hora case.
Your material details a case involving journalist Rosandy Oliveira and the newspaper Zero Hora. They were hit with a substantial fine, our $600,000 in a lawsuit.
Wow, that's a huge amount.
It is. The plaintiff is identified as Judge Iris Helena Medeiros Nogueira, described as a former president of the Rio Grande do Sul Court of Justice.
Okay, so a prominent judge. And the reason for this lawsuit and the resulting fine, as explained in your source material, was the newspaper publishing the judge's earnings.
Exactly. Specifically, the report mentioned she received our $662,000 in a single month in 2023. Your sources emphasize that this was public data.
Public data? That seems crucial.
Public data, yes. And the context your material provides makes the amount stand out even more. It was noted as being 16 times the salary of a Supreme Court minister.
16 times.
Wow. The judge who issued the fine apparently described this our $662,000 figure as an extra and punctual payment, distinct from her regular monthly salary, which was stated as being around our $44,000.
An extra payment of that size.
Right. But the source speaker's sarcastic counterpoint from your material, suggesting she might get such an extra salary maybe 11 times a year.
Yeah.
Just pure sarcasm, of course.
Of course. Reactions documented in your sources include journalism associations calling this judicial harassment and a direct threat to press freedom.
That sounds serious.
They note they've tracked 654 similar processes against journalists in Brazil over the last 16 years. This aligns with the concept of SLAPP suits, strategic lawsuits against public participation, which are often seen as attempts to silence criticism through costly legal battles.
Right. So the original source speaker in your material has a really sharp reaction here. They initially agree the fine is absurd, shouldn't happen.
Okay, so they agree on the surface.
But then they take a turn, delivering a cutting, almost, well, gleeful criticism directed at the press for complaining about censorship now.
Ah, I see. Like, where were you before?
Exactly. The implication drawn in your source is that the press wasn't vocal enough when others faced similar pressures or perceived censorship.
Yeah.
It's a bit of schadenfreude there in the source commentary.
Interesting twist. What this specific example from your sources highlights is a complex interplay. The fundamental importance of transparency regarding public servant salaries, which is widely considered public information, versus the legal challenges faced by those reporting on it. Based purely on the details provided in your material, the amount, the public nature of the data, the judicial characterization of the payment, and the reaction from journalism associations, this case, as presented by the source speaker, raises significant questions about the limits of reporting on public officials and the tactics that can be used against journalists. For you, the listener, access to information about how public money is spent, including salaries, is vital for accountability. And this specific case, as presented in your sources, illustrates the potential hurdles journalists face when trying to provide that information.
Okay, let's move to the final specific point from your stack of sources, which brings things down to a very relatable but still politically charged level. It starts with a viral video you included in the material.
The Picanha video, right?
That's the one. The video shows a woman shoplifting picanha, that highly desired cut of beef from a supermarket. But the crucial part is the commentary or text overlaid on the video in your source. Since Daddy Lula didn't send us picanha, We're going to go get it at the supermarket.
Wow. So this piece from your source explicitly links the act of shoplifting picanha to President Lula's past campaign promise about making this specific cut of beef affordable and accessible to average Brazilians again.
Exactly.
In this context, picanha becomes more than just meat. It's functioning as a potent symbol of economic well-being, a marker of prosperity, and importantly, of a political promise.
Or the lack of delivery on it.
Or the perceived failure to deliver on it, yeah.
And the source speaker in your material reacts with amusement, pointing out specific details like the number of pieces stolen, 5, and that the person filming calls the cashier a vacilão, which is a term for someone considered a sucker or ineffective.
So they find humor in it.
It's treated as a humorous, albeit illegal, form of direct action related to an unfulfilled promise, at least in the commentary. And this is where your source speaker cleverly circles back to our first point with a final ironic jab. They note the woman wasn't arrested in the video.
Okay.
But then they add that if she had been arrested, she would have access to those free prison perks we talked about earlier. The salon, the movies, the martial arts.
Connecting it back.
The source speaker ironically suggests that perhaps she should have gotten arrested if she wanted access to those benefits. It's a really dark bit of humor tying it all together.
Yeah, it is. This anecdote, as presented and commented upon in your source material, serves as a powerful, if dark, illustration of how specific cultural items like picanha can be weaponized as symbols within political discourse.
Definitely symbolic.
The viral video, combined with the commentary referencing the political promise, captures a form of public sentiment, perhaps frustration, cynicism, or just dark humor, about the gap between political rhetoric and everyday economic realities. The source speaker then uses this everyday act and symbol to ironically connect back to the perceived inequalities highlighted by the prisoner perks discussion, creating this layered critique about who benefits and how within the system being described in your material.
So pulling all these pieces together from your stack of sources, the controversial prisoner perks, the Supreme Court Justice's reaction to media scrutiny of his dinner guests, the huge fine against a journalist for reporting public salary data, and this viral video linking shoplifting picanha to a political promise, it paints a very distinct picture.
It certainly does.
It's the specific, deeply critical, and often satirical view conveyed by the source speaker in your material on power, justice, the institutions, and the current state of affairs in Brazil.
What these particular stories from your sources, viewed through the lens of the source speaker's commentary, collectively suggest is a narrative of perceived systemic irony and unfairness.
Yeah, that seems to be the core thread.
Based solely on the examples provided in this material, the critique is sharply aimed at what is presented as misplaced government priorities, hypersensitivity to public and media scrutiny from powerful figures, and, well, actions taken against those who report on public information.
Right.
Understanding this type of commentary, especially its use of satire and specific examples to highlight grievances, can give you insight into a particular critical perspective circulating within society.
It's definitely one perspective.
It encourages you to look beyond official narratives and consider the specific points being raised, even when they are delivered with humor or sarcasm.
It really does. And it leaves us with a key question to ponder, maybe for you, the listener. Given the specific examples presented in your sources, the stark contrast drawn between prison benefits and taxpayer struggles, the reactions of powerful figures when scrutinized, the significant legal consequences for a journalist reporting on public financial data. What does this particular perspective suggest about where transparency and accountability are perceived to truly lie within the system being described?
That's a really good question to sit with.
And how might that specific portrayal, as found in your sources, ultimately affect public trust? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
That wraps up our deep dive into this specific stack of sources you shared. Thank you for bringing this material to us and for joining us on this exploration.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope it gives you plenty to think about and encourages you to keep digging into the stories behind the headlines.